Part 2 of Chapter 25's review will go to the fossil record. Figure 25.1 in your textbook gives you a detailed view of the fossil record. Now, as far as how much detail you're expected to learn, I want you to know the trends that I have given you in the lecture notes. Now, we break this down into major groups of time known as eras, and then eras are divided into periods, and periods are divided into epochs. Now, the Precambrian era is actually two eras. I've broken it down into the Archean and the Proterozoic, but it takes up most of Earth's history, 4.6 billion years, BYA, down to 542 million years ago. Now, during this Archean era, the oldest of the old part, 4.6 billion years old, approximate date of the origin of the Earth, 3.8 to 4 billion years, oldest known rocks, 3.5 billion years ago, the oldest prokaryotes, and about 2.5 billion years ago, oxygen begins to accumulate in the atmosphere. That kind of paved the way to eukaryote life. And they believe that what produced this oxygen was photosynthesis of ancient algae. The Proterozoic, the younger of the older part, oldest eukaryote fossils about 2.1 billion years ago. 600 million years ago, multicellular stuff. The Paleozoic era is a major time frame of invertebrate and vertebrate fossils, ranging from 542 to 251 million years ago. I've given you additional details in your notes. I described the Cambrian explosion at the beginning of the Paleozoic. This is a rather rapid diversification of many invertebrate groups, most of which are still represented by species today, although there were different forms then. The dominance of fishes in the Devonian period, about 400 million years ago. The vast production of seedless vascular plants during the Carboniferous period, about 300 million years ago. So seedless vascular plants were the dominant land plants in the middle of the Paleozoic. This will be more relevant as we talk about plants later. Reptiles, things like that. Mass extinction at the end of the Permian period, ending the Paleozoic, wiped out most things. Next is the Mesozoic era. Mesozoic era, 251 to 65 million years ago, known as the age of the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs dominated the land. You also had gymnosperm plants, very abundant on the land. In the ocean, we had various things like ammonites, which are kind of cousins to the chambered nautilus. At the end of the Mesozoic, 65 million years ago, again, mass extinction event, wiped out the dinosaurs. Although it is believed that birds came from dinosaurs, they would have been the only surviving lineage under that idea. Cenozoic began 65 million years ago, and we're still in it. With the Cenozoic, we had diversification of what I refer to as the big three: birds, mammals, and flowering plants. Now, we did have birds and mammals and flowering plants in the Mesozoic, but they weren't the dominant groups at all. They became the dominant groups here, and we still have the dominant groups: birds, mammals, flowering plants. Now, the next section talks about continental drift plate tectonics. The continents weren't always in their present location. If you look carefully at figure 25.12, it shows you the Earth's crust plates today. The arrows indicate their current direction of movement. Now, if you go to the next page and look at figure 25.13, it is a reconstruction of the movements of the continents over the past 250 some odd million years. Now, keep in mind, continental drift did have a history prior to that. There were actually two supercontinents. One is a very ancient supercontinent way back here in the late Precambrian, known as Rodinia, and then it split apart and then formed again as Pangaea at the end of the Paleozoic era. Then during the Mesozoic era, Pangaea, the supercontinent, split up into Laurasia, a northern continent, Gondwana, a southern continent. And then toward the end of the Mesozoic, those continents fragmented into the continent masses that we have now. Be sure to go over your notes concerning this, because I went through this rather quickly. The last section of the notes talk about punctuations in the history of biological diversity. That is, mass extinction events followed by adaptive radiation of the survivors. This is the concept of punctuated equilibrium. So we had mass extinctions in several places, including the end of the Paleozoic era and the end of the Mesozoic era. Now the prevailing theory as to what caused the extinction of the dinosaurs is known as the meteor hypothesis. A meteor apparently smashed into the Chicxulub crater, which is off the coast of what is now the Yucatan. Massive explosion, lots of dust, blocking sunlight, cooling the planet, shutting off food chains literally at the roots. What took the hit? Large animals, large herbivores, carnivores, anything on land bigger than this. Cockroaches did just fine. They've got plenty of evidence for this, including layers of iridium at the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary, and again, the discovery of the Chicxulub crater. And this concludes our review of Chapter 25.